I don't know if you've noticed or not, but we live in a country and we live in a world that has an obsession with the supernatural. We have an obsession with things that should probably horrify us. I remember growing up, and there are all kinds of TV shows. You can look on the TVs now, and I think Supernatural is entering into its like 12th season, one of the longest running shows about these people who go and hunt down demons and things. I remember when I was younger, there was a show called Crossing Over with John Edward, and I never really watched it, but I remember the premise of it was this guy's kind of like this, he's called a medium, kind of like a psychic, and he meets family members, and he talks to their dead family members. And it's like, oh, this person, wants you to know that they're happy and that they want you to move on with your life. And like, he says things that the dead person supposedly says to him. Yeah, that's not good. I remember like you can turn on your TV now and like there's the chilling adventures of Sabrina on Netflix. It's like this new reincarnation of Sabrina the Teenage Witch. And that's just pure evil. All I've seen is the preview of it, and it's like, man, we got like people that look like Satan on there. We got all these witches and like these pentagrams. We got all these candles. We're like we're not really have anything to do with that stuff. But we live in a world with this obsession with the supernatural, with the occult, with things that should really horrify us. When Moses is reading the law to the Israelites when they're getting ready to enter into the promised land in Deuteronomy chapter 18, starting in verse 9, he says this. He says, when you enter the land that the Lord your God is giving you, do not learn to imitate the detestable ways of the nations there. Let no one be found among you who sacrifices their son or their daughter in the fire, who practices divination or sorcery, interprets omens, engages in witchcraft or casts spells, or who is a medium or spiritist, or who consults the dead. Anyone who does these things is detestable to the Lord. Because of these same detestable practices, the Lord your God will drive out those nations before you. You must be blameless before the Lord your God. The nations you will dispossess, listen to those who practice sorcery or divination. But as for you, the Lord your God has not permitted you to do so. The Lord your God will raise up for you a prophet like me from among you, from your fellow Israelites. You must listen to him. Don't be listening to all these people who consult the dead for things or who, look for omens or cast spells. Don't look at them. Ultimately, Jesus is going to come. You're going to listen to him. But we live in a world obsessed with the supernatural and obsessed with things that should, frankly, terrify us. Horror movies. I was researching horror movies. And I know not all horror movies are the same. I'm not saying that. But in 1990, there were about 229 horror movies that came out. In 2000, 10 years later, there were 358 that came out that year. In 2006, there were 874. See kind of the growing trend. And then 2017, I don't have the 2018 numbers, but 2017 was the biggest year in history for horror movies. Horror movies made just under $250 million, $750 million, excuse me. About $730 million. You can go to Walmart, you can go to Toys R Us, and you can find Ouija boards for sale. I don't know if you know what those are. I don't encourage you to research them, but apparently you use it and ask questions and you supposedly talk to spirits. And some people say, oh, that's not real, that's just a game. Well, let me tell you, when my mom was a kid, when she was a teenager, she told me this story growing up. She went to a party with some friends, and somebody brought out a Ouija board, and they were playing around with it. Nobody thought it was real. My mom asks it the question, who am I going to marry? And 3 letters came back. DLK came back, and she's like, I don't know anybody with those initials. My dad's name is David Lee Kittle. Hey, those things are real. My best friend in high school, he was at a party with some friends. His friend had a Ouija board. They got it out. they kept trying to get rid of it. They kept throwing it in the trash or whatever. They'd look back in the closet, the thing was right back in there. Like, this isn't stuff to mess around with. Now, you can think, oh, none of that's real. You're just saying that to scare people. No, I firmly believe that we live in a physical world in the midst of a spiritual world. And that there's all kinds of spiritual things that happen that affect our spiritual world that we have no idea about. And we live in a world that's just obsessed with supernatural things. It's demonic. See, we like to be scared. That's kind of the draw of horror movies. We want to feel some kind of a jolt, some excitement. And there's a difference between movies like Jaws, with the shark that scare you, and kind of movies like The Exorcist or movies about demons. I think there's a difference in those type of movies. It's one thing to kind of be scared out of your seat by a shark. It's something else to start filling our minds with demons and with all this stuff. Because I'm convinced that the more we open ourselves up to that world of demons and like the supernatural, the more we allow this unseen spiritual world to affect our physical world. Because make no mistake, Scripture's clear that there's a battle that's going on right now that we can't see. There's angels and there's demons that are fighting. And if God would just open up our eyes, I think we'd probably die of fear if we could see what's really happening in this world around us. But just to get this out of the way, I 100% believe that demons are real. I 100% believe that demons can still oppress people. I believe that demons can still possess people. I don't think that quit in Scripture. We're going to look at an instance today. I think there's all kinds of evidence. And I think it's up to us, knowing this stuff, that we only put in things to our mind that are good to put in there. Paul writes in Philippians 4:8. He says, finally, brothers and sisters, whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is admirable, if anything is excellent or praiseworthy, think about such things. Whatever you learned or received or heard from me or seen in me, put it into practice. And then you get this interesting verse, and the God of peace will be with you. It's like the God of peace is with you when you fill your mind with good things. Now, we're going to talk about something this morning that, honestly, it's not preached a lot. I think it's C.S. Lewis in the Screwtape Letters, he said that when it comes to demons and things like that, we either go way overboard and we think way too much about it, or we go way underboard and we don't talk about it at all. But I think there's a healthy medium that we can follow. If you got your Bibles, we're going to be in Mark 5, starting in verse 1. You can turn there. And when Jesus starts his ministry, we've talked about it kind of cursory a few times, but Jesus casts out all kinds of demons. Like, it talks about him healing people and everything, but it seems like every couple of pages you're reading about Jesus casting out a demon. And then you go a little bit more, and Jesus casting out a demon. He's casting out a demon. Sometimes these demons are in kids. Sometimes they're adults. But it just seems like out of nowhere, you switch over from the Old Testament to the New Testament with Jesus, and you just get him casting out demons all the time. Like, it's a frequent occurrence. And I started thinking about that. And I'm like, why in the Old Testament do we not see just demon possession, all kinds? Like, because I was thinking back to the Old Testament, and I was looking at some stuff and talking to some friends of mine. I'm like, hey, do you remember seeing demon possession in the Old Testament? And they're like, well, there's that time Saul got tormented with an evil spirit. God did that. But other than that, like, you don't see like the prophets going around and casting demons out of people. But then Jesus gets on the scene, and it seems like he's doing it all the time. I thought, why is that? And how are so many people getting like infested with demons? Like, how does that even work? And I'm no expert on what they call demonology. Frankly, it kind of scares me. But like, the only thing I can come up with is the Old Testament religious practices, and even in the New Testament, Paul will write about it, kind of He talks about Corinth and all these cult prostitutes and everything, and you'd go to worship and you'd sleep with all these cult prostitutes and offer all these sacrifices, and you're just doing all these immoral things. And I think somewhere along the line, through idolatry and through all this, that people just open themselves up to evil. And then by the time Jesus gets on the scene, it's just commonplace. And he's casting out demons left and right. And I think when he came to earth, the spiritual world kind of got awakened. And like him just being incarnate, him becoming flesh just awakened something. They knew, oh, our time of judgment is not far off. Like they all know who Jesus is. Jesus never has to introduce himself to the spiritual world. But I think when he finally came to earth, they just get into a frenzy. But whenever Jesus encounters a demon, he casts it out of the person and he frees them from their oppression. Like we'll look at this morning, Mark chapter 5. I'm going to read the first 5 verses here right now. And in these verses, you've got the recipe for a horror movie right here. It says, they went across the lake to the region of the Gerasenes. And when Jesus got out of the boat, a man with an impure spirit came from the tombs to meet him. This man lived in the tombs, and no one could bind him anymore, not even with a chain. For he had often been chained hand and foot. But he tore the chains apart, and he broke the irons on his feet. No one was strong enough to subdue him. Night and day, among the tombs and in the hills, he would cry out and cut himself with stones. Like I said, this is a recipe for a horror movie. You've got the dark, you've got the dead, and you got demons. Like that's the plot for any number of horror movies right there. But what's happening here is Jesus, if you remember from last week, this is right after Jesus calms the storm. So he's on the water. Remember, he was crossing over the lake to the other side. Well, they finally got to the other side. They'd started that journey when it was evening, so it's full on dark now. Jesus is tired. He's already fallen asleep in the boat. And they get to the shore on the other side of the Lake of Galilee, and they come to this region of the Gerasenes, where it says that this demon-possessed guy just runs up to them as soon as they hit land. Now that'd be kind of scary. Imagine what they're thinking. Like, they just have an awful, terrifying experience in the boat, on the water. And now they get to the shore thinking everything's going to be great now. We're finally out of that boat ride. And then this demon-possessed guy comes out of the tombs and completely frightens them. Like they were scared before, now they're really afraid. But what Mark is doing here, in chapter 5 especially, is he's showing us that Jesus comes and he gives life to people who are pretty well dead. He brings life to death. He brings hope to hopeless situations. He's going to, after this story, he's going to heal the lady with bleeding who's been bleeding for years. She was hopeless. She'd been to every doctor. Nobody could help her. She touches Jesus' robe. She gets healed. Then Jesus heals Jairus' daughter. Or doesn't heal her. He brings her back from the dead. Jesus brings life in death. And here at the very beginning of this sequence of miracles, you've got a man as good as dead who's living in the graveyard, who's living in the tombs, and he comes to meet Jesus. Now, this is a man, it says he's full of demons. He doesn't just have one demon. Like, this guy's infested with demons. He's more demon than man. And he's got, these demons, they give him supernatural strength. Like, nobody can subdue him. They keep chaining him up, but he keeps breaking the chains. Nobody can control this guy. The whole town, he lives in the Decapolis. What it means is the 10 cities. So all these people in the 10 cities, they know who this man is. They know, don't go down there by the graveyard, especially don't go alone, don't go at night. Like, this man will probably kill you. Probably told their children stories about this man. Everybody knows about him. He's completely ostracized. He's as good as dead. That's why he's living in the tombs. And he hangs out with the dead. I think there's a reason for that. Now, this man, if this were today, and this actually happened, there's a show called Legion. But If this were today, we take this guy, we read this, and we'd probably make like a TV show about this guy. It's like, oh, this supernatural guy, he's full of demons. They give him all this power and all this strength and all that. Let's make him the protagonist of some story. That's probably what we do. We kind of take him and make him into a caricature. But that's not what Jesus does. See, this guy's always crying. He's always like howling at the moon. He's always taking these stones from the graveyard. He's cutting himself. He's trying to hurt himself. And I think there's a point. I think there's a reason that Mark includes that. All the Gospels include that, besides John, that he's cutting himself with these stones. See, all demons want is death. That's all they want. You can look in Mark 9. There's another story of a demon-possessed kid, and the father's begging Jesus to cast out the demon from his son. And he says that the demon keeps throwing him into the fire. The demon keeps throwing him into the water, trying to drown him. All demons want is death. Because that's all Satan wants. Darkness, death, and destruction. And he comes to steal, kill, and destroy. That's what he does. And I think there's a reason this guy's just sitting there cutting stones. Or cutting his arms with stones, cutting his body with stones, trying to hurt himself, trying to kill himself. See, I don't think it's a coincidence that suicide rates are on the rise nationally. You can look at the numbers. There's about 129 suicides a day on average in the U.S. 2017, there were 47,173. It's the 10th leading cause of death in the United States. And I don't think it's a coincidence with the direction that this world is going. You have people celebrating over abortion, and you've got people celebrating over everything that we should not be celebrating. You've got an obsession with the supernatural and with demonic things. I don't think that it's a coincidence that the suicide rates are on the rise and that abortion rates are on the rise. I don't think that's a coincidence. I think it's all interrelated. And I don't think people realize that the spiritual world that we can't see is affecting us more than we know. So in this graveyard, Jesus meets this guy who's as good as dead. Let's read on verse 6. It says, when he saw Jesus from a distance, he ran and fell at his knees in front of him. He shouted at the top of his voice, "What do you want with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? In God's name, don't torture me." For Jesus had said to him, "Come out of this man, you impure spirit." Then Jesus asked him, "What is your name?" "My name is Legion," he replied, "for we are many." And he begged Jesus again and again not to send them out of the area. A large herd of pigs was feeding on the nearby hillside. The demons begged Jesus, "Send us among the pigs and allow us to go into them." He gave them permission, and the impure spirits came out and went into the pigs. The herd, about 2,000 in number, rushed down the steep bank into the lake and were drowned. See, darkness always recognizes the light. Darkness always submits to Christ. It doesn't have a choice. It literally says, if you look in the Greek, it says when he saw Jesus from a distance, he ran and fell at his knees in front of him. Literally, it says he worshipped him. Now, obviously, he's not worshiping him as we worship him, but he recognizes who Jesus is right away. Jesus doesn't have to introduce himself to him. When you look at Luke's record of this, and even Matthew's, the demon says, "What do you want with us, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? Have you come to torture us before the appointed time?" Like, they know that they're on a timeline. They know that there's a time of judgment. They knew it wasn't right then, somehow. And they're just out wreaking havoc, bringing death, bringing destruction, because that's all they know. There's going to be a time where they're not going to do that anymore, but now is not that time. And it says that this man is completely full of demons. It says his name is Legion. And a Roman legion is made up of 6,000 soldiers. Now, I don't know if literally this guy had 6,000 demons. All I know is he was completely full of demons. He had a lot of them, innumerable demons. And Jesus has crossed over into Gentile territory. That's why there's a herd of pigs. That wouldn't happen in Jewish country. Pigs are unclean animals. And the demons don't want to leave the area. They keep saying, Jesus, just don't cast us out of the area. Let us go into these pigs here. These unclean pigs. And there's a lot of different theories and opinions on why Jesus let them go into the pigs. You know, some say he just wanted to show the disciples and the people around what would happen with demons. I kind of buy into that. But he lets the pigs, he casts them out of the man. He lets the demons go into the pigs. Pigs, there are about 2,000 pigs. They dive off of the cliff as soon as the demons enter them, and they all drown. That's exactly what demons do. They bring death. They bring destruction. Go on to verse 14. It says, those tending the pigs, who'd seen this, those tending the pigs ran off and reported this in the town and countryside, and the people went out to see what had happened. When they came to Jesus, they saw the man who had been possessed by the legion of demons sitting there, dressed and in his right mind. And they were afraid. Those who'd seen it told the people what had happened to the demon-possessed man and told them about the pigs as well. Then the people began to plead with Jesus to leave their region. I love this. Look at this. You got this guy who at the beginning of the story, he's running around naked, howling at the moon, just doing all these things, trying to hurt himself, trying to cut himself, just terrorizing people. People won't even go near him. That's the before story. Then he meets Jesus, and you get this after story where he's completely dressed again. He's in his right mind. He's not hurting himself anymore. He's not crying out all night. He meets Jesus, and everything changes as soon as Jesus frees him from his darkness. See, darkness can't stand up to light. It's like you ever turn on a flashlight where the batteries weren't dead in the dark, and it's like, no, I'm not going to shine the light today. I don't feel like lighting up the room. No, you flip a switch, you turn a light on. It's not like the darkness gets to say, no, we want it to stay dark in here. As long as you got power and you got batteries, it does what it's supposed to. Darkness cannot stand up to light. And see, these people, these herdsmen who had seen this man, they knew all about this guy. They'd seen him for years, probably. And now they see him, and he's just sitting there, dressed, and thinking clearly, speaking clearly. Doesn't even look the same. Like, the transformation is incredible. And they're afraid. Just like the disciples were afraid of Jesus in the boat when he calmed the storm and he calmed the sea. Now they're afraid of Jesus for a couple of reasons. One, because what nobody else has been able to do, to subdue this guy, Jesus has done. And so they're looking at him like, who are you? Like, how can you do this? We've had our strongest people. We've had dozens of people try to chain this guy. We've not been able to do a thing. But you come and you just tell the demon to come out, and it does. Like, who are you? What are you going to do to us? So they're afraid of that. And then they're also mad at Jesus because this herd of pigs was worth a lot of money. And now all their money's gone. They say, Jesus, get out of here. We don't want anything to do with you. Just leave. So Jesus leaves. And it's kind of like, what now? You read on in verse 18. It says, as Jesus was getting into the boat, the man who had been demon-possessed begged to go with him. Jesus did not let him, but said, go home to your own people and tell them how much the Lord has done for you and how he has had mercy on you. So the man went away and began to tell in the Decapolis how much Jesus had done for him, and all the people were amazed. Now, at first glance, you read this, and this guy wants to follow Jesus, and we're like, yeah, that's what you're supposed to do. Jesus has been saying, come, follow me, I'm going to make you fishers of men. You let somebody else do this, but you come follow me. Follow me, follow me. That's like the cry of Jesus. If we want to follow him, then we have to follow him. It's like, hasn't he said that to tons of people? Yeah, he has. But now you get somebody trying to follow him, and he says, no, you stay. You stay right where you are. And at first glance, that seems weird. Like, is Jesus saying, oh, you're not good enough to follow me? You know, you're not one of my disciples. You know, there's not room in the boat for you. You just stay here. Like, these are my A guys. You're a B guy. But I don't think that's what's going on. That's what's going on here. See, I think what Mark is telling us is that sometimes following Jesus means staying right where you are and telling everybody else about it. Sometimes following Jesus means you go with Jesus. But sometimes following Jesus means you stay right where you are and you make a difference there. And sometimes following Jesus is hard. I mean, it's always hard, but sometimes it's really hard. Because sometimes following Jesus means you stay in your marriage. You know, that you've been planning to leave. Or you stay in your job. Even when it's like, man, they don't treat me right, or I don't like my boss, or nobody appreciates me. Or you stay in whatever situation you're in. I think that's kind of what Paul was alluding to in 1 Corinthians chapter 7. He's been talking about marriage. But then he goes, and starting in verse 17 of chapter 7, he says, nevertheless, each person should live as a believer in whatever situation the Lord has assigned to them, just as God has called them. He says, this is the rule I lay down in all the churches. Was a man already circumcised when he was called? He should not become uncircumcised. Was a man uncircumcised when he was called? He should not be circumcised. Circumcision is nothing, and uncircumcision is nothing. Keeping God's commands is what counts. Each person should remain in the situation they were in when God called them. Like, don't just change up everything just because God calls you. Sometimes following Jesus means staying in the situation where you are and making a difference there. I alluded to it earlier, but this story here is at the beginning of a section of miracles that Jesus does where he gives life to just hopeless situations. You got the woman bleeding. You got Jairus' daughter who has no hope because she's dead. And because of Jesus, there's hope. You know, because of Jesus, there's the promise of some kind of a better future ahead. And it never ceases to amaze me, but this guy who'd been possessed by demons, we don't even know his real name, we only know the name of the demons, he becomes a missionary. It says in verse 20 that he goes and he begins to tell in the Decapolis, in the 10 cities, how much Jesus had done for him. And all the people who heard what he was talking about are amazed at what he has to say, because they've all heard about him. They all know this guy. They know something's different. They know something has come into his life and has changed him outside of himself. Because they've seen the demon-possessed guy, and now they see the sane guy who's been changed by Jesus, and he's telling them all about this person who's changed them. And I wish we had more to the story. I wish we had like an answer to, what happened? Like, did a ton of people come to Christ because of him? But we don't. I think it's left open-ended on purpose. But it does say all the people were amazed because they saw something clearly had changed. And I want to encourage you this morning. There is nobody who is too far gone for Jesus to completely transform their lives. There's nobody. There's no demon-possessed person. There's no sick person. There's no criminal person. There's nobody who Jesus cannot have an encounter with and completely change their life. Will you pray with me?